All right, so yeah, without further ado, this is Simply AP, our Business Central AP automation offering. Invoices, you likely email them in, you can upload them, you can scan them in, all that kind of good stuff. But when they come into the system prior to hitting this screen here, this listing of invoices to process, they'll go through that data extraction service that we have, the AI-based machine learning, very intelligent data extraction. So it's going to read the invoice like a human eye would, and it's going to take care of a lot of those typos. It's going to take that information off the invoice and it's going to validate it against your BC data, and it's going to pre-fill that information for you. So you can see on the screen here, all of this information, none of it's been keyed in. So none of it has had the risk of those typos. This was all pre-filled by our extraction service. The amounts, the dates, the vendor information, the invoice number, the purchase order information, all that kind of good stuff is already done. So as you can see in this type column, we do support both PO and non-PO invoices. Again, as Tiffany mentioned, so if you do have a non-purchase order based invoice flow, we can accommodate that. So your GL coding, your routing for approval, all that kind of good stuff. If you do more of a purchase order oriented invoicing process, we'll meet you there as well. And the nice thing about our purchase order process is that we can do straight through processing. So not only will we pre-fill data, you don't even have that possibility of data entry issues because you don't have to enter any data at all. You won't see the invoice as it comes through if it is a match. And I'll talk to that in a little more detail in a second. I'm going to go through the purchase order match process here. I'm going to go ahead and click this guy down here. And right off the bat, you can see in red in the screen where there are some issues that have been called out by our extraction service. So of course, it's going to do its best effort to pre-fill all of this information up here, vendor info, invoice number, dates, amounts, all that kind of stuff. But it's also going to do a real-time analysis of the invoice total here, as well as the actual purchase order matched amount from within BC. And it's going to tell us that there is a difference. There isn't an issue here. So in this case, if I were to claim this invoice and take a look at it and process it, I can see down here, if I hover over these red exclamation points, the issues that it encountered. So we will tell you in very, very good detail what the problem is per line item. So in this case, obviously, if we look at the invoice on the right, we can see that there was an invoiced quantity of 10. But if I collapse this in our invoice line item grid down here, we're going to show you not only the invoiced information that we extracted, but the purchase order information from within BC and the receiving information, equally as important. So this is your three-way match right here. So if you do want to take a look at the non-straight through processing, so you want to validate and verify your invoices as they come through, you can see right here, they're trying to invoice us for 10. Again, in red, we'll show you that issue. We ordered 10, yes, but we only received 9. So the issue may have been in the receiving process. It could have been that they actually did only send 9. So this is where you can call out any problems. You can contact the receiving department, contact the buyer, see what the issue may have been. If you do need to cancel out this invoice and delete it and have the vendor re-invoice, that's great. If not, if you do have, if you want to go ahead and just modify the invoiced amount of 9 and say, you know what, I'll pay the vendor the 9 and we'll get that sorted out later. That's fine too. In this case, you can see that we actually did extract all the line item information, but the issue here is that on this vendor template or this vendor invoice, they actually pushed the freight cost as a line item. So we counted it as a line item. Obviously, we didn't have a line item on the PO to match against that. So it is showing us that there is a $150 cost here that's not matching against anything on the purchase order. So in this case, we would just go ahead and delete this guy from the line items, go ahead and account for it in the GL, add our freight cost here, and we're good to go. So we can also accommodate that. So if you do need to add some shipping costs or whatever you need to do to the GL, you can do that as well. Now, I want to flip to an ideal use case. This is the situation that we really wanted to put a lot of emphasis on in this product. It's our straight through processing feature. Now, if straight through processing was turned on in this demo environment, this invoice would never have even landed here. This invoice would have gone straight through into BC. As you can see, I'm going to go ahead and claim this invoice to process. If I look at the extracted detail that we have from the invoice, I can come down here and see we have a bunch of green check marks. That shows there was no issue. There was no discrepancy between the invoiced amount, both quantity and price, the purchase order amount, and the receiving amount. Again, likewise up here, we can see there was a zero difference between the invoiced amount and the purchase order matched amount within BC. So we do have that real-time integration with Business Central and the capability to do real-time analysis of the invoices as they arrive against not only the original ordered information, but also the received information from within BC. You don't have to then hop over into another monitor or bring up BC, search for that purchase order, look up those receipts. All that stuff is right here for you to be able to make that informed decision. If you do want to do a stare and compare on this, you definitely can. If you are confident enough in our analysis, which over time I guarantee you will be, you can turn on that straight through processing and not have to worry about that $16 an invoice or you know, whatever that cost may end up being for you. We can push them straight through and get paid. Now, on top of the straight through processing, obviously we don't live in a perfect world, so these invoices are not always going to match exactly, but we do offer the ability to add a variance of support. So if this came in and the difference here, we saw a $300 difference before, but if that were maybe only 2, 3, 4% off the total amount, we can accept a percentage that you configure. So if you're comfortable with that difference being up to 5% of the total, 3% of the total, whatever you're comfortable with, we'll respect that, and likewise, we'll push it straight through to Business Central, even if there is a slight difference. If that 2, 3 cents, couple dollars, again, less than $16, the cost of the invoice processing itself, but we'll go ahead and push it straight through. Now, if that percentage variable amount ends up being against a $500,000 invoice and it ends up being, you know, quite a bit more than a couple dollars, we'll also allow you to put a dollar limit. So as long as this difference is within a certain percentage threshold, while at the same time beneath maybe $15, $25, whatever you're comfortable with, we'll push it straight through into BC. If not, it will land in this queue and show you in detail exactly what that issue was. So even if you have straight through processing turned on, you can have a percentage variance as well. So on top of that, which is also a nice feature. Now, once it goes through into Business Central, let me flip over into BC and I can show you what that looks like. We also obviously support routing for review and approval based on, you know, workflow type. If it is a purchase order based workflow and it is a match, we're not going to require approval, but we will give you the option to route for approval. So if you did want to go ahead and choose someone in this list, this configurable workflow list to route this for approval, you can definitely do that. And then beyond that, we will respect an automated threshold-based approval process as well. So say I routed it to somebody, but they only had the authority to approve up to $2,000. They give their approval, it's going to automatically then route to the next individual in line, and so on and so forth. Once it's been approved, we will automatically create it in Business Central in the purchase invoices screen. So if I go ahead and sort this by newest, I'll grab one of the ones that's been pushed in here. Over here on the right-hand side, SimplyAP is where we integrate into. It's an app extension, very light footprint. So I can go ahead and choose an invoice. We'll grab this big 5 video invoice here. If I click view, it should take me back to SimplyAP. I'm met with my demo user tutorial steps. So if you did want to take advantage of that, we'll walk you through how to use the system. But so it shows us the invoice, it shows us the line item info, the GLs, any dimension coding that may have been done against this invoice. We do have full support of dimension codes at not only the vendor invoice level, but also the item level. So if you did want to add dimension coding support against the lines themselves, you can do that as well. And we will pre-populate any configured dimensions as well. Comments, you know, if you had any comments throughout the workflow process, and then arguably the most important part is the history. So if I collapse the invoice, we're going to see in excruciating detail, every single thing that happened to this invoice, whether the data was modified, whether it was rejected, who worked the invoice, when it arrived. If it did go through that straight through processing, it would have a record here as well, noting that SimplyAP did push it straight through into BC. So even those items that were an ideal match and pushed straight through will be auditable. So we're not gonna forget those guys. So that's it, start to finish, the process for PO match and SimplyAP. Again, we also support non-purchase order based invoices. So if you do have non-POs, we can accommodate for coding those expenses against the GL as well. We do have full support for the chart of accounts within SimplyAP, so you can take a look at all your accounts that you need to account to, but you can also do a type ahead if you want, which makes for a really efficient way of processing non-PO invoices as well.